Oh, how are you?
I'm good, mate. How you doing?
Good.
Oh, must I say good evening? Because it's evening in Australia. Yeah,
It's late evening here now.
yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for taking your time to connect with your brother from across the continent. It's an absolute pleasure to speak to legends of the game that are on the other side of the board. So thank you so much, mate.
Thank you. Don't know if I can say I'm a legend of the game, but yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome stuff. Let me just start off by introducing myself because we've been friends on Facebook for quite a while, and you know, when you get friends with people and you don't know their background and all that. So just a brief background of myself. My name is Tatenda. Tatenda means thank you. So it's being appreciative. It's in the Shona language. I am based in South Africa. I'm married. I've got one son. He's turning 10, loves the game of cricket. He is a bowler and a batsman, lefty. I'm a cricket coach as well. So apart from podcasting, I do cricket coaching. So I deal a lot with juniors, so all the way from 3 years old to 18, 19-year-olds, that is. And so, yeah, cricket has always been a game. I played a bit of cricket in Zimbabwe all the way up to under 19 national level. And from there, moved to South Africa 2010, then got married in 2016. And yeah, like they say, the rest is history. So with the podcast as
Mm.
well, we just started something around the sports, and we've got one podcast that is to do with mental health, and then this one is to do with sports. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah. Please tell me that I can't, that I won't, that I fail, that I'll never make it out, yeah. Please tell me all the bad, never good, fill my head full of every single doubt, yeah. Please say any negative thoughts, I pop off when I hear people.
Yes. Well, nice to meet you. As I say, a little bit about my background. My name's Jerome, of course, and I've lived all my life. I've grown up in West Australia, played cricket when I was a youngster, started coaching cricket, and started really coaching when I was 12, when I was 13.
Wow.
I started coaching at the local club that I began my juniors at, and then it went from there. 30 years of coaching in various sports and various guises, both at junior and senior level. I coached senior club cricket. I was a senior club head coach by the time I was 21, probably one of the youngest ever to do it. As I say, over that time, my most enjoyable experience has always been working with juniors or young players. That's been where I've had my most success. But I've also not coached cricket. I coach hockey. I've coached various other sports over the years. Probably spent more time now coaching hockey than anything. It's been a while since I coached cricket, but I also umpired cricket for a number of years as well, and was involved umpiring
Yeah.
as well. So I've seen a fair bit in that time, and I've learned a fair bit along that journey, and I've also learned the importance of looking after community, looking after the grassroots of the sport, and paying attention to that. Yes, very much so.
Santa is in town, and guess what? Santa is disguised as Firefly Corporate. These guys have been in the game for long enough to understand a good deal. And imagine you've got a bucket list. You know where you want to go, but you don't know how to get there. Let them do it for you. These guys know a good deal. These guys know where to take you. Just give them your passport and your details, and they do everything for you. Now imagine you want to go to a certain place but you don't know how to get there. Or you're going to a big business conference and you have to worry about your presentation. Let them worry about your logistics. How's that? That is amazing. That's a good deal. Head on down to www.fireflycorporate.co.za, or better yet, email info@fireflycorporate.co.za. When you get onto the website, there is a link that takes you to WhatsApp. When you're there, you're speaking to a person and not a robot. That is amazing. Happy holidays, and Firefly Corporate is going to do it for you. Yeah. You mentioned that you started coaching when you were like 12, 13. You actually needed coaching yourself, and here you were sort of giving your expertise to youngsters when you're a youngster yourself. How does that work, mate?
Well, to give you a little bit more, I guess from the time I was 12, 13, was looking to go into being a teacher, primary school teaching, physical education teaching. That was where I wanted to head. And I saw this as an opportunity to grow and develop in that area and grow the skills that I needed in order to be able to become a successful teacher. So coaching was a natural fit. Also, I was passionate about giving back to the club I was at. I'm passionate about giving back to community, which I got largely from both my grandma and my nana and my parents, who did a lot in the community as well, around sport and other things. So it was just, as I say, it was just a natural fit, and that's how it happened. I started out assistant coaching. I was an assistant to one of the more senior coaches at the club, and then very quickly moved into coaching. And it was juniors. It was really juniors. So when I say juniors, I was coaching juniors who were 9, 10, 11 at the time. So they were quite a way younger than me when I was 13, 14. But I learned, I didn't start out the coach I am today, 30 years later. As I say to all coaches out there, I started on my journey. I was very young and inexperienced, and it took a long time, and there were a lot of ups and downs on that journey. There were a lot of moments where I'd say in those early years where I could be a bit hot-headed and tend to think or jump before I think, or leap before I think, as they say.
Yeah.
I probably was also a coach in a hurry, a little too much. So by the time I was 18, 19, 20, I was eager to become a senior head coach. That was probably the first stint was probably too soon, if I'm honest about it. I was too eager too quickly to want to do it. And but I see coaching, I've always seen coaching as a journey. I've always seen life as a journey, and you go through different phases. That was the start. That was the one thing I say to coaches: the only thing you're ever certain of in this world, whether it be coaching or anything, is when you start on something. That's the only thing you're certain of. You don't know when it's going to finish, and you hope that it never does. I don't think it ever does finish. I think what it does is it changes, it evolves. You go in different directions with it, and I certainly can say that now. I'm in a completely different direction today than I was 30 odd years ago when I first started.
Yeah. What's the criteria of your junior setup? Because you look at Africa, or you look at South Africa, there is what they call the KFC. It used to be Baker's Mini Cricket, so it's based on the sponsor at the time. So previously it was Baker's, the Baker's biscuits and all that. Then now it's KFC, and I believe you in Australia, you've got KFC as well. So it's called the KFC Mini Cricket, where kids are being taught the fundamentals of the game, from holding the cricket bat to how to hit a ball, what it means to get a 4 or a 6, or to bowl a guy out, and all the sort of fundamentals of the game. How is the structure in Australia for you guys?
Well, the structure here in Australia has probably changed. When I was coming through, when I first started, we had a program called Kanga Cricket, and that was sponsored by Western Star Butter.
Okay.
Of all things, Western Star Butter. And I believe that was a very successful grounding for kids. I believe that was a very successful program. Certainly in cricket, as every other sport had a modified version. All sports virtually had a modified version. The sport of hockey had Minky, cricket had Kanga Cricket. They all had them. Then probably in the 90s, they sort of neglected cricket, and a lot of the other sports sort of neglected these and forgot to keep updating them, keep modernising and keep improving them. And the result of that was that they sort of withered on the vine, so to speak, for that age. Then they reinvented it in the form of Have a Go Cricket. Now, that program seemed to be working quite well. Then it got renamed into cricket. Now it's called Woolworths Cricket Blast. To be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure whether it's any better. I actually don't believe it's better than what was there with Kanka Cricket. I actually think it's worse. I actually think the program is not as good as it was. And I think, unfortunately, what's happened with any junior talent, with any junior program, what's happened is there's an unfortunate factor that tends to occur here, and it seems to have occurred a lot more probably since the 2000s, where adults have imparted themselves on the process. So they've created rules that they think are about inclusion and giving everyone a go, but in reality are not actually helping with development of young cricketers or young people in a specific, young kids in a specific sport. They're actually doing more harm than good. And I'm talking about batters having to retire when they make 25 runs or 20 run, not being able to build an innings. It's all being about flash, and it's all about flash, no substance. This seems to be the trend now. If a young kid can hit the ball for six, can make runs quickly, can do all of those things, fantastic. They look great. They're put up in lights. Whereas the young kid who really applies themselves, like I used to do as an opening batter, I could make runs, but I also knew how to build an innings. I knew how to spend time in the middle. I knew the importance of building an innings. Someone like that in junior cricket doesn't really exist today. They're not there. And I think that's doing harm. And I think the harm it's doing is that we're not seeing the young talent coming through with the correct techniques, with the correct, they don't have the right sort of application. Everything's focused, everything's geared towards flash and glam. Everything's geared towards T20 cricket, instant cricket.
Yeah.
And I think that's wrong. I think that's an imbalance that's occurred. And it's occurred because instead of working hard on that Kanka cricket model that they had, which was really good, they've evolved it into something that, it's called Woolworths Cricket Blast or T20. It's all focused on the Big Bash, the T20 cricket.
Yeah.
That's the focal point.
Yeah.
Not on where it should be focused on, which is first-class cricket, Sheffield, in Australia's case, Sheffield Shield cricket, one-day cricket, the bedrock of what Australian cricket has been about for years. That's been the bedrock. The talent pathway was that you came through, you went through into district cricket, you came through the pathway, and if you're any good, you got into your state team, and then you played Sheffield Shield cricket. And if you're good enough from there, then you played Test cricket or one-day cricket, whatever that was.
Yeah.
Now it seems to be, we'll get them in, go and have a bit of, if they're flashy, they'll play a bit of T20 cricket, and then suddenly they're in the Test team. And I think that's a serious problem. And I think it's a serious problem that is going to, if they're not careful, come crashing down around their ears. It hasn't yet.
Yeah.
Well, it hasn't in some states, but there are some states in Australia where it has actually. States that were once powerful, like New South Wales, as of 12 months ago, they're on the bottom of the Sheffield Shield table. Unheard of. Hadn't won a game until late last year. Hadn't won a first-class fixture. Hadn't produced a Test player in 2 years.
But Western Australia used to be the focal point of, that was the epitome of everyone that represented Australia at some point, isn't it?
Well, Western Australia right now is probably at it's done a lot of work in this area, and it's got a lot of talent. We are a state with a lot of talent. We won the Sheffield Shield the last 2 years. We've won the one-day title, the Big Bash, although I still put, if I'm honest with you, I put the Sheffield Shield as the one. I put that as the pinnacle. That's the one everyone should be aiming for. That's the one everyone should be. Certainly, if you're at the high performance level at state level, that's what you should be aiming for. And West Australia prides itself on that.
Yeah.
Some of the other states, I don't think they worry as much about that. I think they think winning Big Bashes and doing all that and bringing money in is great. The problem with that is that it's not developing good cricketers.
And it's not sustainable.
It's not developing. It is not sustainable,
Yeah.
and it will not be sustainable. The cracks are already appearing. They're not appearing in WA because WA's worked very hard at it over the years.
Yeah.
But it is appearing in other states, and other states laugh at that. They think, "Oh, no, that no, people are not seeing the problem here. They're not seeing the problem, and they're not realising the problem."
Yeah.
Like a lot of sports, my greatest concern, whether it be cricket, whatever sport it is, my biggest concern is that they realise that there's a problem and it's too late. I give you an example of it. Hockey. In the 90s, Australian hockey was at its zenith, certainly in the women's game. The Hockey Roos were flying high. They won 2 gold medals. They were doing great. They were doing fantastic. They had a great Dr. Rick Charlesworth was doing wonders with them. He was creating depth in the talent pool. Then it fell off a cliff after 2000. The whole sport fell off a cliff. And it's really become, well, I'd have to say it's become, I know there's people that don't like me saying this in the sport, but it's become an irrelevance as a sport.
Okay.
It's not as high up. Now, cricket could face the same problem here in Australia. They don't want to think that because they've been the summer sport for years that it's going to maintain itself. There was a period of time, certainly when I was coming through, where cricket actually came under threat from basketball. It came under threat.
Wow.
And it was hemorrhaging talent to basketball. It was also hemorrhaging talent, and it's still today hemorrhaging talent to AFL football. And they've got their own problems anyway. But it's still hemorrhaging talent. So it doesn't want to think that because it's been the summer sport for years and years and years, that it's just going to keep being that way. The problem is, I think it does. And I think the problem is that they, like a lot of sports, they sleepwalk towards disaster.
Can you then say you mentioned earlier that when it comes to junior cricket, it's all about the kid that can smash the quickest sixes or the quickest 50 that's going to make it, or sort of that's going to be in the limelight, as opposed to the kid that's going to give you 50 or 50 balls or 50 or 60 balls, 70 balls, whatever the case may be, because they've built in innings. They've gone through everyone, the quickies, they've gone through the slower guys, the spinners and all that to get to that half ton, as opposed to the kid that's going to come in and quick bash. And take, for example, right now with Glenn Maxwell. Nothing against Glenn Maxwell, but he is the kind of player that's going to come in and score you 50 or 20 balls. And it seems like every kid wants to go that route. Can we then say, because that's not sustainable, but everyone is looking at Glenn Maxwell and thinking, if he's doing it, surely that's the way to go. But are we not killing Test cricket, or are we not killing the 4-day game because we are going for glory?
Yes, we are doing damage. And I think the media's got its role to play there, because it's got a tendency to get these young kids. Maxwell was an example of it. There's another young kid in Australia now called Fraser McGurk.
Yeah,
same thing happening there. Yeah. McGurk, same thing's happening there. They give them fancy names like Big Show and all this. They boost them up. And then when they fail, comes crashing down.
Because there's no technique.
And they do fail. I think a primary example of that, I hate to tell it, and there's a lot of examples of that, of it not working. And, it's rare to find it where it does. Now, in fairness to Glenn, he's worked hard since then, and he's tried to put the effort in to become a better 4-day cricketer. It hasn't taken to a degree, although he does have a Test 100. Although I do remind people that was mainly on the subcontinent, where he is a very good bat. There's no doubt about that. On the subcontinent, he can bat quite well. He suits the conditions.
Yeah.
Put him in Australian conditions in a 4-day game, it just isn't there. It isn't there.
Yeah.
They need to let these kids, particularly when they first come on the scene, particularly when they're 18, 19, they need to let them evolve. Stop wanting them to be the next Don Bradman. Australians have had a terrible, terrible time of doing this repeatedly over and over again. Doug Walters, who was a great that played cricket for Australia and played for New South Wales, the moment he came on the scene, he was considered the next Bradman. He was considered the next Bradman, not because he looked like Don. He looked like a young Don Bradman. He had a pretty good test career and he scored a number of hundreds in a session. 100 in a session in a test match, mind you. Doug Walters has got 100 in a session in a test match on several occasions. You want to talk about batting fast, there it is.
Yeah.
But it never quite took because he got labelled. Damien Martin, another example, brilliant young cricketer.
Yeah.
Before he even had played Sheffield Shield cricket, he was being labelled the next Bradman because of what he did in junior cricket. And luckily enough for Damien, he managed to have a reasonable test career, but they could have destroyed him.
Easy.
They could have destroyed him. And I think we're seeing it play. I hate to say it, but I think we're seeing it play out right now with something that's just occurred. I think we're going to see another young cricketer unfulfilled.
Yeah.
And that young cricketer plays for WA and he's just missed test selection again, despite the fact he scored more runs than you can poke a stick at in the last 2 years. Everyone knows who he is, so I don't need to name him. But he's going to go unfulfilled again.
Is it because of the runs that he scored, or is it because of the name and where he's from that sort of you get labelled and you get victimized based on where you're from?
Look, I've got to be a bit careful here because I start putting my West Australian, patriotic West Australian hat on.
Yeah.
And it does have a habit of getting me in trouble. Look, I'm proudly West Australian. I won't deny that. I'm proudly West Australian and West Australian first. I'm not going to kid myself. I always will be.
Yeah.
But yes, there is a problem. People in the past have said around Australian cricket that if you play for New South Wales, you got a better chance of getting in the test team than you play for anyone else because there's a saying. You get your baggy blue cap, you get your baggy green cap and a bat and a paper bag at the same time.
So
that's how it looks. Now,
so it has everything to do with the way you play your club into your first class. That's going to make you get into the test side, which is not
now,
right.
This is no, it's not. This is an interesting point that unfortunately there are certain people within New South Wales that just don't see this. They don't think there's anything wrong. And, of course, they don't think there's anything wrong because they're too close to it. But something is wrong. Now, of course, I won't deny it. There was times where Western Australia could rightfully or wrongly were in the same position. Look, you go right the way back to the 1972 Ashes. There was actually, believe it or not, through the 70s, and the 1972 Ashes is a prime example of it, an Australian test team that didn't have a single New South Wales player in it and included 8 West Australian players.
Jeez.
So there was a time where West Australia were in the ascendancy in that regard.
So there was a time where Western Australia also was enjoying the perks or the rewards of being Western Australian.
But if you look at, but I would argue if you look at those 8 West Australians that were in that team at the time, they were exceptionally good. They formed that brilliant Australian team of the 1970s. You're talking about Rod Marsh, the late Rod Marsh, Dennis Lilly, John Inverarity.
Those are quality players anyway, yeah.
Bob Massey. Bob Massey took 16 wickets at Lords.
Sure.
He pretty much, that was Massey's test. He pretty much did brilliant things. Later on in the decade, there were people like Terry Alderman, Wayne Clark, Craig Sargent. West Australia's always had good talent, but there is still this perception that unless you're from New South Wales, it's harder to get picked and to stay there.
Why?
And I think the perception's got in recent times.
Why though?
Well, it's a hard one, yeah. It's got worse in recent times because, and it's interesting, it's got worse, it's progressively got worse. Since Alan Border, and this is an example of it, since Alan Border, there have been I think 5, 6 permanent captains of Australia, of which 4 have come from New South Wales.
Cheers. So it's still proving that
I think
point,
if you
right?
look back, yeah, and I think there's a perception that, and New South Wales, I think unfortunately there's a perception that there are certain elements within cricket that are in charge. I think it's got worse in recent years. I think there's people within cricket in this country that, at the highest levels, that are not staying in their lane, are not running things, are interfering in other things, are perhaps, decisions are not being made on talent and form and what you do in Sheffield Shield cricket. They're being made on personality, how you fit in with the in crowd.
Does it have to do?
I think there's a real problem.
Does it have to do with New South Wales being the richest union? Is it about wealth?
New South Wales being the richest state? Well, they're not actually. West Australia is the richest state of Australia.
Yeah, that's what one would believe. So yeah. So you think that
simple cold hard reality with them.
So you think that Western Australia is supposed to be the big guns because they've got the money, they've got the bucks. Why then is New South Wales?
No, I don't. I don't expect. I'm not asking for 10 West Australians in the Test team. If they're good enough, they should be there. What I'm saying is, I think there needs to be a reality check here. We're seeing good young talent coming through that is not getting its opportunity because places are being occupied not in the team because necessarily on form, but in the team because it's not what you know, it's who you know, or they're not part of the in crowd. I think that's where the point I'm trying to make, maybe not as good as I could. I think the recent decision around the selection of an opener is a prime example of bad decisions being made, not on the core tenet that Australian cricket has always had. You make runs in Sheffield Shield cricket, you show what you can do at first class level, you get your chance.
Yeah.
They're being made on some other basis.
It's supposed to be the one that scores runs has to go forward because that's the basis of best team forward. But then if you're going to have a guy that is moving from one spot to the next to try and makeshift a position for them to bat in, what happens to the guy that's been banging runs all through the season and doing the hard graft? What are we saying about
that particular player who they tried to make space for? I'm not denying it. He comes from West Australia. He's a brilliant talent. But in the old days, when a player in the Australian team lost form, they were sent back to Sheffield Shield cricket.
I think we have a problem. That's the plan everywhere, where if you're not scoring runs in international level, go back to first class cricket. Yeah.
But there's a problem in Australia right now. And the problem is the Australian domestic season right now is in the middle of T20 Mickey Mouse cricket.
So T20 is taking over then?
It's not in the middle of Sheffield Shield first class cricket at the time when these guys are playing Test cricket. That used to be the norm. When Test cricket was on in Australia,
four-day cricket is happening.
Shield cricket was on at the same time. Shield and one-day cricket were on. So
Makes
if a player
sense.
lost form in the test, they went back to Shield cricket, they had to get runs. They had to earn their way back in. That particular player who may or may not bat at 4 in the next test match hasn't played a Sheffield Shield game since late last year.
Why? Is it because of international duty or because of IPL cricket?
No. Well, yeah, he's been sitting on, he's been polishing the seats at cricket grounds around the country.
But at IPL, he never played a match. He played probably 1 or 2 matches. So are we taking over the dollars over the pride?
Well, this is the other thing. They don't seem to hold the same pride in Test cricket. They don't seem to hold the same pride in playing for their country. The dollars seem to be the thing. And that's what's gone wrong with West Indian cricket. That's what's gone wrong. And that stems all the way. By the way, the problems with the West Indies are not IPL. It goes all the way back
to their own administration.
It goes right the way back to the early 80s when the rebel tours of South Africa occurred and the West Indies those players went there. A whole generation, second-tier generation of West Indian cricketers were lost. Were lost. Wow. Due to the elitism of the top team.
Yeah.
Due to the elitism.
Yeah.
The same thing occurred with England, and it probably still is to a degree.
Probably
it's
still
going to occur with Australia. It's going to eventually occur with Australia too. It's occurred with South Africa,
and I think it's happening in South Africa as well at this point in time. Yeah,
it definitely has, and it's going to occur. It's going to eventually occur with Australia. And what's going to happen is a number of the young kids are seeing what's happening. I'm working my backside off. I'm coming through the talent pathway. I'm getting into the Sheffield Shield. I'm supposed to be getting into the Test team by making runs or taking wickets. It's not happening. I'll blow that. I'm going to go off and play T20 franchise cricket.
Get money.
So they're lost. They're lost. Talent and all of a sudden, in about 10 years, they're going to be looking around going, where's all the talent? And then they're going to be saying, well, how did this occur? And unfortunately, there's going to be people that are going to have to turn around and say, well, we told you so, but you failed to listen. You failed to listen.
So for you guys that are within the junior setups or the junior cricket sense, how would you advise a youngster to take Test cricket as the epitome of their cricket when you know that they're probably not even going to make the side, not because they're not talented, but because probably they're not of the right race or they're not from the right state, or maybe T20 is paying?
It's funny enough, in the past, I used to say to kids, always aspire to represent Australia. You always aspire to represent Australia. I used to say that. I don't know what I'd say to a young cricketer coming through now after what's happened in recent days and what's been happening in recent years. I honestly don't know what I'd say to them.
Yeah.
I've got to be honest about that. I just don't know what I'd say.
It's difficult to advise a kid, don't go for T20 because they're going to tell you, I'm getting $1 million. So if I'm getting $1 million for 6 weeks,
I don't know what I'd say to them.
What as a coach would you say to that kid? Because every kid is just going that route now. So are we then saying that's the death of Test cricket?
I hope it's not. I hope it's not. Unfortunately, I've got a funny feeling it's going to be.
Yeah, sad.
And I think it's sad that it's occurring. I don't necessarily think cricket getting into the Olympics is a good thing, because I think the unfortunate problem is it's going to drag the Americans into it, and I think they're already into it. I think they're toxic to any sport they touch.
They're already in it because there's rumors that the Major League is going to be the next big cricketing thing. Unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I've got a problem with that.
Yeah.
I've got a problem with that. I think they're toxic to any sport they touch. They've got a habit of it's unfortunately it's about them quite a bit, and I think that's going to be a problem, combined with, and I'm probably going to get in the neck, but combined with India, well, not India, but the BCCI. and the IPL. I think it's doing damage. I think it's doing serious damage. It's not doing damage to Indian cricket because the Indian players don't go around playing T20 cricket.
They don't play everywhere, but every other player plays everywhere, basically. So yeah,
exactly.
It's a sad reality.
Exactly. Yeah. Clever. Mm. And unfortunately, I think a couple of other countries, namely my own, are quite happy to go along with that. And I don't think they realise the damage they're doing. They're quite happy, and this is a problem. Australia, and particularly those running Australian cricket, who have become elitist, are quite happy to lecture others. But you know what they say, those that live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, and I think the Australians need to remember that.
Yeah.
And the Australians have got a habit of doing this, whether it be cricket or whether it be any sport. Australians tend to have a habit of doing this on the international stage. They're quite happy to throw stones while they're living in a dirty, great big glass house.
Yeah.
But what do you do?
Yeah. Anyway, Jerome, you've been amazing, but I just want to touch back on your advice. You said there was a time that you were 19 years old and you wanted to play, you wanted to be a senior head coach and sort of felt like you were big on your head. What advice would you give? Because someone may be looking at it and at 19, they feel like they're ready for the challenge. And yet you're saying a big head. What advice would you give to a youngster that is coming up within the ranks and they love the game, they love the coaching, they love to learn, they love the challenge, but at the same time, sort of age is not on their side? Do you discourage them from carry on and pursuing your goal, or do you then say,
no,
slow down? What advice would you give?
No. What I say is coaching is a journey. You're going to come to many sliding door moments along the way. You choose the path you want to take at that time. You can't reverse once you've chosen it. You have to go through that door and commit. If that happens to be you want to become a senior head coach, then you go through that door and commit. You learn the lessons from that, good or bad, and you take the lessons, good or bad. It's gonna have its ups and it's gonna have its downs. Sometimes it smooths out after a while. That's the other thing I remind coaches. On the journey, at first, it's very, very up and down. Gradually over time, the further into your journey you get, it smooths out. If you can survive your first 5 years as a coach and still have passion and enjoyment for it, you'll have a long life as a coach. Wow. If you don't quite make the first 5 years, you might struggle a bit, but you might come back to it later. Don't feel like you can't come back to it later on.
Yeah.
But if you want to have a go at it. Coaching is a wonderful thing to do.
Awesome.
Giving your time to coach young kids or coach anybody is a wonderful thing to do. And I say, look, go for it. Enjoy the journey. Have fun with it. You never know where it's going to take you.
Yeah, awesome. Lastly, Jerome, what would you like to be remembered as?
Me? That's an interesting one. I don't know. You'd have to come back to me on that one. My legacy. I just want to be remembered as someone that was passionate about coaching and giving to the community and doing my best for particularly helping young people to become passionate about playing sport and be lifelong consumers of sport, whatever that may be. That's something I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about helping other coaches and having a legacy of helping other coaches along their journey as well. For me, it's not about what I get out of it. For me, it's about what I can do to help others enjoy things around their sport and enjoy their sport and enjoy coaching.
Yeah. Awesome. Jerome, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for taking your time to speak to people in Africa on the other side of the continent, and for me as well to connect with gents like you that are doing their best to change the game. Because be it you're in Australia, I'm in South Africa, or I'm in Africa, or anyone else that is somewhere in the world, it's all about changing the game, and cricket has to win at the end of the day. And it's individuals like you and me that keep on pushing to make sure that cricket wins, not individuals or anything like that. So you are one of those people, and it makes me so humbled to have connected with you. So thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you.
Awesome.